So go to your local Toys R Us. And then from there, go to the gack aisle. And then put some gack in your mouth. And then start to chew it like gum. And then blow a bubble. And then from there, blow that bubble into the air. And then when it's floating around, then you have the analogy of what it was like today when I was walking around down the street. Welcome to the news, by the way. How you doing? Welcome to the news. Now that we've hopefully drawn you in for the day, let's get into it. Once you got that gack in your mouth, just like at Toys R Us, that gack, you blow it up like a piece of bubble gum. You blow that bubble, it's floating in the air. That's what it was like today. We were walking through the scene of where I was walking. And then basically there was like more like colors in the air, and they were floating and they were flying and such things. And what it's relative to, what it's indicative of, is making sound that's floating up in the air. So what that's like, it's like actual colors floating in the air, and also steam floating off of the colors. So it's like an illustration of the sound, but it's basically like a way to make spatial sound. So we want to take space and we want to make sound using that space and the mentality of what I'm talking about, and visualizing sound equaling colors and steam floating off of the colors, and like almost little segments or fragments of sound in different sections of the space. Pretend it's a hall necessarily with like plants and things, and it's all decorated with plants and different growth and nature and such floating about within a couple buildings. And then there's, in essence, sounds floating around, basically like little worms, kind of, with that are fragments of different materials and such things. And that's what today was like. It's the beginning of the day. It's the beginning of the story. It's the beginning of the news. It's the beginning of the indicative, the indications that float into the next pieces that are, in essence, like painting spaces with sound. In essence, painting spaces with sound. Multiple changes within the sounds, each piece that's floating around in different ways, and it's perpetually floating, sort of, somewhat, within the spaces, so therefore the sound is playing on itself, and it's continuing, and it's different spaces, though. It's spatial sound. It's not just sound coming from one space in two speakers, for example, but it's spatial sound because it's floating around this whole space, and it's different sounds that are sort of overlapping at the same time, and it's colors that are representations of the sounds as well, and at the same time there's steam floating off of the sounds. And that is the indication of the day, and how we float into the next portion of how it's meant to be an indication of starting the games for change, the change for games, the change for games, games for change that are change for games. The same difference, in essence. We want to change for games, to have games around the world, in essence trying to paint the world by using colors to be able to paint the world in the same fashion, and make, in essence, the world like a sound festival, more or less. And sort of using this example, we want to try to, in essence, like the game Chutes and Ladders and Candyland combined, like one times the other one, to equal this instance, this functionality, this process that is meant to look like this. What it entails is depicting and visualizing what the world is. That is Change for Game Studios. In essence, what it entails is the world becomes like a big board game, in essence, like the game of Candyland, where everything is games, in essence, and the game of business becomes games in of itself, and in essence everyone's trading on philanthropic energy. That's sort of the currency that's in the backdrop of the whole process and the spectrum, and so it kind of paints the world, and so this is our opportunity to repaint and reframe the world as a whole. And so what we want to do is try to talk about it in that fashion, so that we're now trading on philanthropic energy, and that's sort of the backdrop and the backbone of this whole instance in operation, where you combine the game Chutes and Ladders and Candyland into one times the other one, and then develop a new process and a new physical platform where we're all sort of functioning. But in essence, it's sort of an analogy to be able to change and transitions the games, or the nature of life, so that business itself revolves on and runs on philanthropic energy, from, in essence, being able to connect on games to begin with, and then being able to take the frequencies from the energies that are created from the different games that are played, basically from focusing on games for change and painting the world through, in different countries, through sounds. In this similar fashion to the first example, we're trying to paint the world through business music. In essence, we're trying to paint the world through business music. We're trying to paint the world through business music. Business music is, in essence, philanthropic energy, and it's also correlative to spiritual finance. So how we want to do that is trying to take this energy and paint the world, in essence, with similar business music sounds, not just sounds like music exactly, but business music, where the frequencies and correlations between philanthropic energy and business music and music in of itself, which is business music, which is like something trading on philanthropic energy wavelengths as opposed to just like regular wavelengths. And as a result, that business music is in essence correlative to the frequencies that is within business music, and that therefore translates back and forth to philanthropic energy. So philanthropic energy and business music sort of go hand in hand. They go back and forth in terms of what they are, chemistry and chemically. It's because the world then trades on philanthropic energy, and that's based on the backbone of business music, which has to do with making and manufacturing philanthropic energy. So therefore, if all adults are playing together and they're playing different games together in the world, that develops and creates philanthropic energy. It's changing the game in of itself, in of business, which business in of itself is meant to make impact, and this is what the purpose of is of. So now the games are starting now, the games for change are starting now, the change for games is starting now. That's in essence what was decided after the change for games, or the painting of the colors of the sound is in essence was swirling around, and that little instance of the gack in the very beginning to grab your attention, in essence, was an illustration to just try to conceptualize how it looks to be able to put gack up into the air, which is fun and interesting, but it's not actually bubblegum. It's like a combination of blowing bubbles into the air and also like chewing gack, which is not actually meant to be chewed at all, but then putting that fun into the air and then painting the world and the air with actual colors in a similar fashion, because that is in essence how we want to function. That is in essence how we want to look at things. Because if we trade on this type of energy, then as a whole, as people, we're able to chemically change. And once this is our inspiration, once it's our North Star, then we're able to become fundamentally different creatures as a whole, fundamentally different beings, fundamentally different processes as people in terms of chemistry and what our inspirations are and what our goals are and what we pursue all at the same time, so that at the end of the goals, we are chasing philanthropic energy, and it's all aligned. We're all aligned as people, and therefore it's much more correlative. And therefore, once we are able to cross-habit, cross-coexist, and cross-promote, and cross-coalesce, and cross-coexist in terms of frequencies, in the reference of frequencies, when we start to in terms of frequencies, cross-inhabitate with one another and become energies and frequencies that are overlapping and such things, that the compound interest of those things in terms of philanthropic energy that exists within people and the games and the activities that we're doing and the physical activity and the energies that's transposed and developed on the back end of that becomes a greater energy, and it stems at the people. But the people fundamentally, their energy changes to begin with once the incentive changes to begin with, and in terms of how the game is played from the beginning, in essence. So what we fundamentally must do is we must change what's in the water, we must change what's in the chemistry, we must change what's in the focuses between all of us people, and change it into philanthropic energy as the goal. That's the new form of currency, in essence. That's the incentive. That's what's in the water. That's what's in the blood. That's what's in play. That's what's in play. Playing as kids, like on the schoolyard as kids when we're young, just playing any games that are in front of you, because that's the nature of the whole process of the whole nature of games, and that's what's at the backdrop of philanthropic energy as a whole, which is the new currency, in essence, in this new game of games for change, form of games for change, form of playing games for change, for to change the world, in essence, in terms of different countries being able to come together and play all as one, because that's what we all were as kids, as ones, and we also speak the same language of music at the same time, so it's all correlative. And in that same fashion, something we kind of want to try to do next, in addition to announcing that Games for Change has begun, we're trying to begin the Games for Change process through the use of this podcast, as well as other things, hopefully means such as also trying to interview other people like a normal podcast usually does, trying to shift that up and step things up so that ultimately we're able to use podcasting to be able to connect with other people, such as like on Zoom calls, for example, be able to Zoom with them so that we'll be able to connect and be able to function like a normal podcast somewhat with people who are in different places, not in the same location necessarily as myself. And then at the same time, there are perhaps times where video can be happening, and there can be on video interviews happening at the same time with myself, and concurrent instances where we're in person and live, and it is possible that to occur like that, and it will go down like that, and it is possible to find people of higher value than myself to be able to try to add value to the greater equation and the process and the things that we're talking about as a whole, so that ultimately we're able to hopefully work towards a community like some of the other people that are out there doing podcasts that are similar to what I'm doing, but not in the same fashion. And hopefully there's a community behind us, and the more people and strength and energy can grow, and then those can again correlate and cross-promote and be able to co-inhabitate and collaborate and co-synergize and coalesce with other audiences that are out there throughout social media, for example, that are all frequencies and certain energies that are out there at their current time doing what they do now, but they're not exactly changed, they're not chemically changed. In the meantime, what we want to do is get our substances into their vibes so that ultimately we are all able to coincide and swim together in a similar frequency fashion and be able to coalesce for what that means and flow in this global sound festival, all as one, all in time, all using the oneness, like the mentality within becoming one in the spiritual sense that is depicted in a spiritual frequency sense, but frequencies of different natures that are coalescing in essence, completely various and different like snowflakes, but all sort of merging like steam at the top of water, but all made of different colors. And by the way, the words paint and plant look the same if you don't put the period on top of the I in the word paint. They look the same almost when you put them next to each other if you don't put the period on top of the I. Thanks again. Hope you're having a good day. Thanks again for stopping by Dinky Tech Piece. Sorry that this thing's a little bit weird. It's a little bit off. I'm sorry. Thanks again. Hope you're having a good day. Thanks again, Dinky Tech Piece. Bye.